If you would have told me that one of my favorite surprise rap releases within the last month would have come from a former bad boy artist who was put away in jail 13 years ago, I would have told you you were crazy. And then if you would have told me, hey, by the way, the album in question, this guy actually recorded while he was in prison, I would have said, how is that possible? You're out of your mind. And yet that is exactly what has happened with DEP'S new album, Influential. And I want to talk about it.
Cause I'm influential. See my rap dog group. They do the same dance I do. Cause I'm influential. Next time you go through, just tell them that I sent you. Cause I'm influential.
That's right, DEP, the artist in the early 2000s who was signed to Sean Diddy Combs' Bad Boy label and put out singles that were hot, like Let's Get It, as well as Special Delivery.
I spit it out. Special delivery. I want that. Special delivery.
Hasn't put any albums out for a long time, and with good reason. You see, while he was in the limelight, he withheld a dark secret from everybody, that back in the early 90s, in an attempt to try to do a robbery on somebody, he ended up harming someone with a gun and then fled off. So his conscience got the best of him, and finally in 2010, he went to the cops and said, hey, I did this crime years ago, and I wanna know what happened to the guy. Turns out, the guy that he had hit up with the gun ended up being unalived. And so as a result of that, he ended up going to jail, voluntarily almost, by the way, and was on a prison sentence for 15 years to life. But then back in December, he got clemency and was allowed to commute his sentence down to where he was eligible for parole like this month. I went to his Instagram account and was looking through the comments, and he had something that said, oh, by the way, I put out an album. Turns out he actually recorded a full 17-track album called Influential, which, by the way, since he was in prison, he had to record it over the phone. I can only imagine how many hours that took between having to listen to beats and then having to perform each song within like 1 or 2 takes so that whoever was recording him on the other end of the phone could get all the material. Now, when I saw this, I was like, there's no way this album can be good. Like, I record songs and I have full-on microphones here. The audio quality of a telephone is not that great. So I can only imagine that this is not gonna be that great of an album. Turns out, this dude pulled it the freak off. First off, dude has not skipped a beat in terms of his delivery and flow. He's trying all different types of styles on various songs on this album to where each song, you can tell it's him rapping, but his delivery is different enough to where it keeps you energized, entertained, and looking forward to the next track. The album itself is very reminiscent of old school bad boy albums in a sense that there's actually a levity to the proceedings here. Yes, there are songs where he talks about what life was like growing up in the hood and being on down times, but there are quite a few party tracks on here. There are love anthems. There are songs where he's talking about grown man stuff like getting your life together and being off drugs. And perhaps most importantly, there is very little cursing on this album. Like, he does the best he can to not use any kind of foul language.
I can say the N-word, but guess what? I ain't.
With the exception of the occasional, like, once or twice damn and hell. Like, for the most part, this is actually a clean affair, which personally I like, because I always feel as though rappers could rap good songs without having to use all this foul language, and all DEP does here is prove that that's absolutely possible. But given that the old version of DEP did curse in his songs, it's very clear that he's gone through some positive changes in his life, from getting off drugs to finding God again, which is probably why he's not cursing all that much on the album. And what's interesting is there are times on this album where he mentions God and his faith and God being there for him, but it never sounds preachy. It just sounds like a dude that went through some trials and tribulations and is speaking real talk, but not in the way that sometimes gospel rap artists get into, where it feels like everything's just like, oh my God, sins are forgiven, oh my God, go to God. Like, it's not that feeling at all. So the album starts off with, I guess, a podcast interview he did where this lady was asking him about what it's like now that he's no longer a bad boy artist, what's life been like for him in jail. And then the last part of the interview, she says this.
You know, you have coined a lot of phrases like fish and spaghetti, gravy baby. Wow, DEP. You have been kind of influential.
And I never thought about just how influential DEP actually was to the culture. Like the Harlem Shake dance, he really brought that forth. And then some of the sayings that are now being said today, he said. So it was interesting that based on that conversation, he decided to call his album Influential, which ends up being the first track. And let me tell you, this Influential track, this starts off the album with a banger. It's got a very positive, up-tempo party beat, very much like something you would have heard Bad Boy put out back in the day. He's talking about living the good life, mixed in with the fact that he knows that the dances he put put out and some of the stuff he said has hit up on the culture and is being used, which makes him influential.
See my rap dog group, they do the same dance I do, cause I'm influential.
I just keep singing that chorus all day. Now, I will say within this first track, there is a portion of it where he's trying to go into the chorus, and as he's rapping it, it's kind of offbeat from the beat. And so that is something that happens every so often on this album, because obviously G-Dep was recording this album from prison. And so I'd say about 95% of the album, he is on beat, but there are just a few pockets here and there where either he's talking a little bit faster than the beat or slower than the beat, and it kind of throws off a little bit. But for me, it didn't take away from the enjoyment of the songs on the album. It's just because it only happens every so often. And actually, considering that he did this through the phone, I'm actually surprised it didn't happen a lot more. Next, there's the song Our Little Secret, where it opens up with him kind of flirt talking with a woman on the phone, talking about, hey, when you saw me, why didn't you try to like kiss me in front of other people? She's like, oh, whatever. And then from there, yeah, it's this whole track where he's talking about trying to meet up with this girl and the things they do together, and how it's like ultimately they're keeping between themselves, so it's like their own little secret of a relationship. And while the majority of the song is about that, he also has some really clever lines that open up the track that I thought were like pretty clever and funny.
If the pound found a beat that was heat, this is super sick. So sick I wrote the rhyme with some turmeric. Now I'm not MC Hammer, but I'm too legit. They say school is in, I'ma start tutoring.
Next up, we have the song Jesus Piece, and this song is a little bit of a double entendre, because on the one hand, he's talking about having a gun, which is called a Jesus piece, and then he talks about how he's carrying that gun because he thinks it's gonna keep him safe, whereas what he really needs is Jesus's peace, i.e., Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and the peace that he brings when he's in your life.
Yo, I need Jesus, please. Look at my Jesus piece. Before I meet Jesus, please. I pray that I lead these streets.
And this is kind of like the first telltale sign you can tell that he's had a transformation in his life as a result of giving up his old lifestyle and getting back into his faith. He also has a great fast flow at the end of this track, which again, considering that he's doing this on the phone, he actually keeps on beat the entire time.
I load up the paper and make up a million prints and sit it down on the copier and pass it out to all them haters who wanted my flow to play out like a floppy disk, but it's obvious, give him a party buzz.
Even though he's been in jail for a while, he's been able to kind of pick up on some of the newer styles that rappers are using, and he's been able to adapt to them very well on this album, particularly on this track. Next, there's the track Entrepreneur, which is another up-tempo beat that is very reminiscent of like earlier Black Rob track. But yeah, it's him talking about how, you know, as a black dude, you gotta be making your moves, you gotta hustle, and if you can hustle in the street, then you can definitely be out there in the legal world and hustling as well.
Now I wasn't born with a silver spoon, even if I was what I love, I would still pursue. And you know it's hard out there, it's a familiar tune. All it takes is a bit of faith and the will to move.
It's a positive vibe track, one that's very encouraging and also is quite enjoyable to listen to. Speaking of which, next we have the track Bubbly, which in and of itself is quite the bubbly track. It's got this bouncy / scattery type of beat that is really quite the earworm.
I'm bubbly, like a tub when it's sudsy. Don't want me in front of company, just trust me. I'm bubbly, bubbly.
Not to mention his chorus that goes along with it.
Bubbly, bubbly.
And it's one of those mid-tempo party tracks that just basically is like braggadocio, talking about living the good life, having money, having types of watches and cars. Plus there's a section toward the end where he's kind of talking a little bit to all the fake hanger-oners who only wanted to support him once he got on, but didn't think he'd make it at all before he got there. But yeah, standard mid-tempo party track that I found to be enjoyable, and I just kept like bouncing like this when I heard it.
Bubbly, bubbly.
Then you got the song Black Privilege, talking about how you gotta hustle to get it, and if you're black, then you gotta hustle even harder.
I make more in an hour than I make in the week. So when you see me in the street, pardon if I don't speak. I gotta hustle 2 or 3 jobs so I can eat. Had to get it how I live. It's hard to get a degree.
And so because of that, he considers his black privilege being able to move about in the world as he wants to. He can wear his cap to the back and know that he's good because he's still out there making moves, making money, and helping people out. The song after this is called Lady Gaga, and at first it was gonna be a song that was all about a particular woman.
I don't really care what they say. I don't really care what they do. My Lady Gaga like Mary J. I just wanna be with you.
But it ends up almost being like the black version of Dude, Where's My Car, where he wakes up at a woman's place and then he's trying to figure out what happened to his car the day before, so he has to backtrack his steps to go to the cafe that he ended up parking nearby. And it's pretty much just a random story of him trying to get back to his girl, I guess. mixed in with like him trying to take some money out of some place, and then at the same time talking about this girl being his Lady Gaga. It's one of those songs that has a narrative to it that within the context of the chorus doesn't actually make sense. But the chorus is lovely enough and sing-songy enough to where I didn't really care. Next, we have the song called The Old Me, where I feel as though G-Dep here is trying to do his best imitation of Drake, because the whole song is like very sing-songy, not to mention that stellar chorus.
I used to take and never give, but that's the old me. Nowadays I listen what they told me. Keep a steady watch out for the phony, cause you'll never see it coming mostly.
Like the beat that's accompanying it is quite the dreary, dreamy beat that I actually really enjoyed. The song itself doesn't really have a narrative to it. It's just him rapping about a bunch of various things, ranging from like looking out for haters that may be around him, to hanging out with a girl, to then hanging out at the mall. Like just standard rap stuff about like various lines that don't have to go together to make a good song. But that chorus, oh my God, I've been singing that nonstop. It is absolutely great. Also, I don't know where he got all these various beats from. I think he might have used like beatstars.com or something, but the production is stellar. Like whatever beats he chose for this album, he was on point, because all these songs back to back, the beats have been absolutely incredible. Anyway, next up we have the track called God Heard, which I think is one of the more poignant tracks on this album. On this track, he talks about how he was living the good life, but at the time that that was happening, he was still feeling really depressed and down on himself, and that probably alludes to the feelings he was having as a result of the shooting that he had taken a part of, which led him to doing a lot of drugs and alcohol to try to self-soothe himself. In the midst of that, he talks about how he forgot about what God's words were, and understands that at the point where he was at his lowest and he was trying to pray and he thought that nobody was listening to him, he understands now that God was able to hear him and eventually take him out of that dark place.
Cause all my enemies all around me, I know God heard. Now I know I'm in God's hurt. I was crying out vain on it.
The simplistic keyboard beat in the background actually serves to better heighten the story that he's talking about how even at your worst moments, God is still listening to you, ready to help you when you're ready to go to him. After that, we have another faith-based title for a song that's not necessarily about faith, but it's called Stop Blocking My Blessings. 1, this track is a banger. 2, his flow in this song is absolutely ridiculous. And 3, I love the subject matter on this song, where he's talking about people who on one hand are trying to hate on him for trying to get success, but on the other hand are trying to copy him and emulate him, basically in an attempt to try to block his blessings.
Yes, when I thought we was rocking, I guessed it. You would go left and I got an odd message. You said you see my plot, you was hot that I pressed it. And stop blocking my blessings.
Then we have the song Rose in the Concrete. Now this album has a lot of various samples on it, but this one was easily the most recognizable because it samples that dun 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 Christmas song that plays like every year in December. Again, I don't know the various beat makers for this album, but whoever made this beat was able to take that sample and turn it into a full-on almost Christmas trap song. But no, it's not Christmas themed. The song itself is G-Dep talking about how he was seen as trash and less than back in the day, and that despite his circumstances, he had to grow up out of that and be able to make something of himself.
Before I got polished, they had threw me in the garbage. Then I was a novice, now I'm certified pompous.
It's a very similar parallel to Tupac's Rose That Grew From the Concrete poetry book. But yeah, this song is one that had me bopping in the car with that little stank face on it.
But this ain't a high horse, they got the eye.
Hallelujah. Get That Out Your Life is another poignant song on this track list that when you first listen to it, you might not think it's as deep as it actually is. Because for the majority of the song, when I first heard the song, the way I was hearing it was, okay, G-Dep's talking about leaving a former lover who was toxic, their relationship was very tumultuous, and so he had to get away from her as fast as possible, but it was really hard because he loved her so much that he was sacrificing for her and struggling to get away from her. But then at the end of the track, he says this.
This goes out to everybody suffering from addiction.
And that's when I realized, oh snap, this whole song was about getting over addiction and all these substances that he was using beforehand in order to have a better life for himself. And so I had to go back and listen to the track and was like, oh my God, like all the references he was making was in reference to drugs and substances.
I thought I'd never leave you, cause I used to breathe you. I couldn't deceive you. I hid you from the people, but our bond couldn't be equal. Because you were illegal, it was wrong for me to bring you to that club where they could see you.
And so it made me appreciate the track even more. The fact that I had to go do a second listen through and a third listen through in order to really fully feel the impact of the track. It's absolutely incredible that he's able to put together a song with metaphors that allude to the struggle that people have when they're in addiction. All put over a jazzy beat, by the way, that is absolutely infectious and addictive. No pun intended. Next up is the song Flowers and Candy. It's a great track. It's pretty simple. It's about him trying to woo a woman and being willing to do things for her and take her out and show her a good life and get her flowers and candy. Like, it's one of those like standard typical lovey-dovey type of songs with a lovey-dovey type beat that's probably meant to draw in the females. But even as a guy, I still like it too. Like, I like hearing songs where people are trying to treat women well and want to like do good for them. Like, it was a very enjoyable track. And yes, that includes his crooning on the chorus.
Flowers and candy just to make it day. Love me 24/7, so for heaven's sake.
I will say, this is another one of those songs where at parts he was slightly off beat, which threw me off a little bit, but again, does not take away from the enjoyability and the message of the song. Next up is the very dreary song called I Don't Want to Go. Over a very melancholy beat, G-Dep is basically talking about how he doesn't want to go to another funeral.
I don't want to go to another funeral, even though God calls him home and it's beautiful. I know it's a part of life and it's usual, but I don't want to go to another funeral.
You know, person after person that he knows has been dying, and as much as he cared about them in real life, him going to all these funerals, it's not good for him, and he doesn't want to have to continue to go to those and see people that he cared about being put underground. He also touches briefly on another downer that can happen, especially in places that are very low income, and is that when somebody dies, the insurance doesn't go through, and so that means that the person that just died can't get a tombstone, and they can barely get a funeral, which only heightens the amount of emotion about why he wouldn't want to go, because who wants to go to a funeral where you can't even like bury the body in a nice casket and the person can't even get a tombstone so people can see who this person was. Then we get the second to last track called Head Start. And this song is running on all cylinders. We get another great beat with a little tickling keyboard sound, and G-Dep is displaying another killer flow on this track.
That's
hard, son!
Okay, I'm still hungry and got my eye.
Look, real talk, this track ain't gotta be about nothing, all right? He's coming in, talking about getting a head start, and he's just going off crazy, but it's just like the style, the delivery, the flow, the energy of this track, man. Like, I'm just like in my car just bumping it the whole time. This is one of those, you need to download that ish right now, put it on your phone, start bumping it, because I'm telling you, that little beat in the background, can't stop, won't stop indeed. And then we get to the last track called Only Life I Know. And basically, G-Dep's talking about how hustling is in his blood, and so he's not gonna ever stop trying to make this money or to make moves to be able to get to another success level, because it's just in him. Like, this is all he knows how to do, is how to hustle and how to try to do everything he can to make it.
I be out here grinding, going hard, honestly, ma. Why? Cause it's the only life I know.
At the end of that song, you hear this.
Yeah, man, yo, bro, it was a lot of people that, you know, that stood online for the phone while I was doing this album, man. I ain't even gonna lie, man. I wanna just shout brothers out. They was well considerate, and they just let me vibe. It was nothing but love, man. I appreciate it, man.
So yeah, dude really recorded the album in jail and had other people in jail supporting him to do this and being willing to give up their phone time so he could record this. Again, it's an hour and 11-minute album, 17 tracks of stuff. I imagine if they saw him writing this stuff and how positive the messages were gonna be, they were like, yo man, do your thing. We liked you back in the day, we support you now. So yeah, that was the album. And I gotta say this, I've heard a lot of rap albums in the past 6 months to a year, and G-Dep by far, surprisingly, has been one of my favorites. Aside from some obvious audio quality issues, because, you know, him doing his songs on the phone is gonna be a lower quality than using studio mics. But real talk, guys, this G-Dep album is probably one of the best rap albums that I've heard in the last 12 months. It's lively, it's got party jams on it, it's got real stuff behind it. He's able to get his point across without having to curse. And most importantly, this is coming from an artist that people probably aren't even looking out for anymore. Like, I'm probably the only person that is doing a review on this album, and I barely came across it because I didn't even know it existed until like 2 days ago. This is an album that you yourself should take a listen to. You are doing a disservice to yourself if you do not allow yourself to listen to G-Dep's influential album. He's not on a major label anymore. He is now an independent artist, and as an independent artist myself, I understand the struggle that can go with trying to get your stuff out there. But guys, there was a reason he got signed to Bad Boy back in the day. This dude's got the raps, he's got the storytelling abilities, he's got the beats to to back him up. This G-Dep album is fire. G-Dep's album, as recorded from prison, to me, sounds better than Drake's last full album. It's got more meaning, it's got more depth, and it's a banger of a good time. So yeah, I would say go to Apple, go to Spotify, definitely check out G-Dep's influential album. I promise you, it is an album listen that is worth your time. Anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I'm APT Songs. Thanks for watching this review. Be sure to leave a like, a subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. I'm out. Peace.
All the girls in the place trying to get in my space, but I